From the family protecting an ancient dish made from a toxic shark species, to the climbers in Nepal looking for honey on 800-foot cliffs, we learned how people find and prepare some of the world's rarest foods. Our first stop is Björnören, Iceland, where this family has been processing Greenland shark meat for generations.
The Greenland shark is the most toxic shark in the world. Fresh meat, you would get very sick, then a little bit more, you could probably go blind, and then death after that.
So what exactly does it take to make it safe to eat? We met with Gudrun Hildebrandsson. He's running his family business of shark curing here in Björnören.
I've been eating this shark since before I got teeth. I've been doing a curing process probably since I was 10. So this is just all my life. Just shark. We don't catch them ourselves, not anymore. Now we buy them from these big trolling boats who catch the shark accidentally. But my family used to catch them and hunt them.
Gudrun cures about 60 sharks a year. From fishing to cube, the whole process takes 6 months. The meat is first fermented in cold storage rooms like this one.
Next, I'm gonna open it up and you're gonna put your head in it.
Okay.
You're gonna inhale. And then you're gonna explain the smell you feel.
Okay, I'm ready.
Shall we check it out?
I'm ready, okay.
So.
Stick my head in.
Yeah, here we go.
It's I dye my hair and it's literally like bleach. It's hair bleach, right?
Okay,
yeah, like hair dye. Oh wow. So I'm sorry. sorry.
It is very strong.
It's really strong.
Because it's a closed unit.
You know what it is? It's hair bleach and Stilton.
We are working with similar bacteria, like when you're doing cheese.
So that's why.
Let's check this out.
Oh, you can see the oozing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can also. This is like, it does not smell as intense as when we walked in.
No.
So this can stay here for some while longer. So here we have the thinner pieces.
Yeah.
And we make these handles in the skin for grabbing them, lifting them up, hanging them up. So these are the thinner pieces. And under here we have the fillet. So this is how that's much thicker pieces. And he has white meat. He does not have a fat layer, he has white meat. And it's very important to have the skin on because the meat is so loose itself that if it's no skin, then it's just then the meat just basically stretch. The thinner pieces, after the process, the meat becomes sort of red or brown, and we call that glerhákarl.
Glerhákarl.
Yeah, and the meat is it's more chewy and salty. And then we have the fillet. That stays white. The fillet we call skýrhákarl. Named after the milk product, skyr.
Yeah, we love skyr. What is the liquid that's coming off then? And
ammonia. Water, like there is a lot of water in the meat. The Greenland shark, he has much more water in him than other fishes or other sharks. So it's ammonia.
What is that doing in the scientific process of it? Because it's poisonous when it's fresh?
Yeah, the Greenland shark is the most toxic shark in the world. And the Greenland shark is a deep ocean, cold ocean shark. So Icelanders, they first started fishing them for the liver. And they used the oil from a liver. So for the first 200 years when they were fishing them, they had to throw the meat away. They couldn't use it, so it was a big waste of meat. And in Iceland, in isolated areas, it was a big waste. So 400 years ago, probably accidentally, they discovered a process to use the meat.
What would happen if I took a bite of that now? What would happen to me? Would I
now
go blind?
It's that far in the fermentation that you would be fine.
Right.
But before, fresh meat, something small, you would get very sick.
Yeah.
Then a little bit more, you could probably go blind. And then death after that.
Okay, great. That's great. I will not be taking a bite of that. So this part of the process, is this the most important part to get the taste of it, or
this basically does everything. It makes the meat not toxic. It's preserved. After this, you can eat it. It's not toxic, but the drying process is just to get a better texture in the meat because it's just so wet and moisty.
Yeah.
And it's very important that these boxes, they have these gaps on them, so the liquid can leak from it, and also for oxygen to get in because the meat it needs to breathe. There are chemical changes that are happening.
Yeah.
That are making the meat untoxic. First, people didn't know this was a chemical process. It was an accident. Now this is a chemical process, and there are a lot of interesting things that we are, even still discovering.
Yeah.
It's also different after where the shark has been, in what depth, in what temperature he was caught. It's different after what chemicals are high or low in them. So in these boxes, the meat loses around 30%. So it loses a lot of weight here. And then in the drying process, it loses like 50, 70%. So total use of meat is around 8%.
What happens to the ammonia when it drains? I mean, is it okay to be stuck? I mean, you've got I've got boots on and you've got little sandals with some stuff. Yeah.
The ammonia the liquid here that's fine. We could drink it. I won't though. But
I'm pretty sure that's a cure for something.
You want some maybe? No.
No. One shark will give from 30 to 40 pieces of fillet. The meat ferments for 6 to 9 weeks in the wooden boxes, then is hung outside for 6 months to fully dry out.
To know if it's ready, we check the texture. And these are all like good. They are, the texture is fine. We don't want it too hard and not too mushy. And then we have this one here. This one is not stiff enough. So he needs more time, but these here are ready. Here you see the skin. You should...
Oh wow, it's like a... You know when these people have really terrible like 1970s walls where they, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Yeah, it's like sandpaper. But yeah, this is, I mean,
actually,
it's really rough.
This was used for, in Iceland, this was used for sandpaper. And these points, if you look closely, you see the points in the skin.
Yeah.
They grow in one direction. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And so these points, they grow down with his body. So when he swims, he gets this sort of thin layer of air around him. It's always air around him. So it's easier for him to swim and to get faster. And it also works like gives him a little bit more insulation in a cold ocean.
It's like the meatiest fish I've ever seen. Yeah.
Here we have a piece of the fillet. And in the drying, the piece, he gets this dried crust around it. But you see here, when I slice it open, that he still has this beautiful white color at the inside. And here the meat is just ready to eat. So there is never nothing added to this meat in the process. There is no cooking, there is no smoking, like nothing at all. It's just natural process from the beginning till the end. And then you see how smoothly it's cut.
Yeah.
And then you take this here.
Thank you. It looks like ham.
Yeah. And then I'll have one also.
Cheers.
Skål.
Skål. Okay. I was going to say that actually doesn't. It's the aftertaste is kicking in now. Yeah.
And now you feel it. It's coming up in your nose. Then it's doing what we wanted to do. We wanted to give us like a kick. It's supposed to be strong.
I can taste the ammonia kind of smell now.
Mm-hmm.
At first it was just like chewing a piece of ham.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, the texture of it in your mouth. And then the aftertaste. And then it's actually like stinging my tongue, stinging the back of my tongue. Mm-hmm. Do you ever get over that? It's like eating bread to you now.
Everything you feel is probably 10 times more than what I feel. For me, I sort of miss it. But I know good shark from a bad one. Two sharks who arrive here together, they go through the process together. Yeah. After the process, they taste similar but not the same. It is the not even amount of ammonia maybe in them or salt or other chemicals that are different. So that's why they don't taste the same.
Yeah, you can taste the smell of it, but it's that really kind of like rich Stilton cheese like hits the back of your tongue, and it's just the size of your tongue, and you don't think that's ever going to go away, maybe. But
You want some more?
I'll have a little bit more. Yeah.
You have a little bit more?
I mean, I think that my tongue's just used to this now. I'm a shark convert. It's amazing though how much of it is in the smell.
Yeah.
It's just So would you recommend eat it before smelling it? Just go down the hatch?
Yeah. It tastes much better than it smells.
Okay.
I'll have another one also.
Right, I'm just going to try to chew this bit.
So
it's the texture now. I think at first it was the smell and then the taste. Now it's the texture. It's like gone into almost like a gelatinous kind of texture in my mouth. I think it's because I've just like masticated it so much in my mouth. Just, yeah. There we go, I'll get over it.
The second one was also a little bit bigger.
Yeah, the second one was the kicker, yeah. The shark does have a reputation internationally. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
It's good. This is not for everybody, you know. People go in two parts, even Icelanders. Either you like it or you don't. But I recommend everybody at least to give it a try. Today, this is eaten like a snack for special occasions. But before, this was eaten like with a meal, like for something extra. And this is so healthy that you can't eat too much. It's often the shark was eaten like with a food that was like on the limit of being good or bad, or probably bad, because he helps the digestion. So there's a chemical company in Iceland who analyzes food, and according to them, the shark is the healthiest food that is made in Iceland.
And I just, you know, like when you have a really strong shot of alcohol and you get that kind of like burning.
Yeah, similar.
That's what I'm getting at the moment. Is that quite a common thing?
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so.
It's just like I kind of feel it in my heart and my soul now.
It is strong, and we want it strong.
Want it even stronger? Gudrun made me try some fermented shark cubes, dipped in Icelandic schnapps. How much is too much to put in here?
Today, this is called brennivin, which would be translated in English like a burning wine. And this used to be called, in Iceland, svartidauði, or which would be black death. So you let it stay there for maybe 20 seconds, something like that. Just we are marinating the shark. Now it changes a little bit to maybe like a licorice flavor.
Yeah, that's really licorice. Yeah, that's exactly how it tastes. That's really nice. Yeah. This isn't your personal supply bottle, but
no.
Yeah.
What's also good is to have a piece of the shark and a piece of the rye bread, the Icelandic rye bread. And then, of course, you know, the shark on its own.
Yeah.
It's the best.
You just love the shark so much.
This is my grandfather's shark fishing boat. He used to catch sharks and other fishes in this boat. The boat's name is Síldin, and which is herring in English. And he's first registered 1860. My grandfather bought this boat 1929. Then he was 19 years old. And then he had been working on this boat at least since he was 14.
It's a proper family business then.
Yeah. So like, shark has been involved with my family for 600 years, I guess.
Wow. And how did they used to catch it then? Yeah.
So they used hooks. This here, this is from my grandfather's shark fishing set. This is very old. And the chain had to be at least 3 meters. And they used usually a seal meat or a seal fat for a bait for the hook. And this was maybe 100 meters down. And they could feel when the shark was testing the bait. So they start to tease him until the shark swallows the bait.
I mean, this is a big boat. How big is a shark?
This boat is around 8 meters. And the Greenland shark is, usually he's from 3 meters till maybe 5 meters long. This jaw here you go. Yeah. This is from maybe 5 meter long shark.
Wow. That's massive.
Yeah, and this one is then from, I would guess 4 meters.
And these, I mean, would these hurt humans or?
So the Greenland shark, he lives so deep that he's not in our swimming waters. And this is his lower jaw. And you see here, they're always growing a new set of teeth here. And the teeth, they grow up, and he changes his teeth around every 3 weeks. They just flip over, and the old ones, they just fall off. So he's got somewhere around, I don't know, 4,000 set of teeth over his lifetime or more. And this is his skin, but that is very interesting. Like, you can stroke the skin one way, but it's harder to stroke it the other.
Oh yeah, there's some more resistance one way. It's like sandpaper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is just like all my life. Just shark.
The village of Sildunga sits about 6,000 feet above sea level. 64 families live here, and they're all involved in the hunt for honey. Everyone comes together the day before for the Maruni dance, which celebrates good over evil. The next day, Man, the village's main honey hunter, gets the handmade bamboo ladder ready. They keep essentials to the minimum: ropes, buckets, and gear to protect against bee stings. They're heading to Tarebhir, a cliff where they've hunted for thousands of years. It's a 3-hour drive. The village elder leads the commencement ritual. At the bottom of the cliff, they start a fire to smoke out the bees. At the top, another group assembles the ladder. Then they tie it to a tree and slowly move it down the cliff. Man climbs down the ladder barefoot for the best grip. He's about 80 stories above ground. But for safety, Man ties himself to the ladder by a rope. That's his only harness. As the bees swarm around him, he puts his hands in his pocket to protect them from stings. He still remembers the time when he was attacked by bees 3 years ago. The stings are painful, and to avoid fainting, Man rubs honey into his hands. But he's trading one risk for another, because the honey makes his hands slippery. Still, it has been 30 years since a honey hunter died on the job. Mun uses his 12-foot-long stick called a tango to cut the honeycomb. Finally, he breaks off the comb. 800 feet below, a plastic sheet catches it. They collected 8 combs, leaving behind 36 others. The next day, hunters head back to the village and start extracting the honey. Mun says it's more abundant, stronger, and sweeter in the spring. The smaller combs usually have the most, about 500 ounces. Locals celebrate the hunter's safe return in a tradition called shosho. It's meant to settle any nerves the men had during the hunt. These customs have been passed down for generations in Nepal, where people have been using this honey as a natural medicine since 1300 BC. They believe that it cures respiratory issues and that it works as an antiseptic and an aphrodisiac. While scientists are still researching the effects of mad honey, global demand has exploded in recent years. And that has led to overharvesting, with foreign groups coming in to hunt for their own honey in the Gurung's land. So the Gurungs found a solution to regain control. And there's a reason why it's home to the very uncommon mad honey. The largest honeybee species in the world, measuring up to 1.2 inches, lives here. The Apis laboriosa nest in altitudes ranging from 3,000 to 10,000 feet above sea level. And they feed on a specific type of rhododendron that has a neurotoxin in its nectar. That's what triggers hallucinations. But climate change is causing the flowers to bloom unpredictably. The bee population is also shrinking because of natural disasters like wildfires, heavier rainfall, and extreme temperature changes. This all means less honey. In 2022, the village harvested about 4 gallons of honey, compared to about 40 gallons in 2017. Half of the honey is distributed evenly to every single villager. The rest goes to markets in Nepal. Other cliffs across the Himalayas and Turkey also have mad honey. And it sells online for hundreds of dollars. But this village makes only $1,800 on average every year from honey sales. So it's not really about the money. Most people here rely on farming for a steady income, like Mun's father. But he participates in all of the hunting traditions like every villager. Mun began hunting in his early 40s, when the Gurungs believe a man is in the prime of his life. Before that, he worked construction jobs in Malaysia. In fact, 56% of Nepali families have at least one person working and living abroad because of the lack of jobs in the country. They send home more than $8 billion a year in remittances. Mun's son is also a construction worker. But Man hopes he will come home soon to carry on the tradition of honey hunting.
तल भिरमा जानी अब मै भनौं न पहिले चाहिँ मै गयो नि त हैन तर म मात्रै सिकेर पनि भएन मेरो भाइ मेरो छोरा हैन उनीहरुले पनि सिक्नु पर्यो भन्ने हिजो भयो नि त म चाहिँ गइन हिजो
Ayam cemani itu cemani tersebut sebenarnya dari bahasanya saja itu diambil dari bahasa Sanskerta yang artinya hitam legam.
The story of Ayam Cemani chickens starts in Indonesia. But even here in Java, where the chickens are native, it still takes work to breed a top-notch all-black chicken. The unique colouring of Ayam Cemani chickens comes from a genetic mutation called fibromelanosis. In other chickens, only certain cells release pigmentation. Fibromelanosis, however, causes nearly all the cells in Ayam Cemani chickens to release pigmentation, resulting in dark black feathers, beaks, bones, and even organs. But this requires the right pair of chickens, which breeders in the US, like Rachel Stewart, are hard-pressed to find.
To start a flock, you're probably be looking at $15,000 to $20,000 to get a good group of birds, the housing and the feed and everything that you need for them.
If a chicken doesn't have 2 copies of the genetic mutation, it can end up with undesirable characteristics like white feathers, lighter toe pads, or pink mouths.
You want to not ever have like a pink mouth. You want to have, if not anything, an oyster mouth, which is like a grayish.
While most of her chickens sell for $2,000 or $3,000, Rachel says a high-quality rooster with a completely black mouth would go for $9,000 or even $10,000. The Ayam Cemani chickens that weren't bred on Rachel's farm came from Indonesia, but not directly. Because of government restrictions on both sides, breeders in the US can't get their hands on these chickens easily.
So what you have to do typically is find somebody in a different hub, a different country, that allows for you to import from them. So, for example, my line was imported from Canada.
As a result of all the export restrictions, the quality and price of Ayam Cemani chickens outside of Indonesia can range widely. This is why chicks from different American farms are listed online for anywhere between $35 and $90. But who exactly is buying these chickens?
I've noticed that the people who purchase from us are rare breed collectors of different avian species. You think of it in comparison to an Amazon parrot. If you get a parrot, it's going to cost you at least $5,000, right? So these are rarer and more difficult to create in general than even a high-quality parrot.
Back in Indonesia, customers come from all over the world.
Jadi orang dari Cina, dari Taiwan, dari Thailand, kemudian dari Belanda juga pernah datang ke sini untuk mengambil telur ayam cemani dari peternakan kita.
Surprisingly, Ayam Cemani eggs aren't black. Despite all the pigmentation in their bodies, the eggs they lay are a standard off-white colour. Here, Anar sells his best chickens for up to $6,000, sometimes to other breeders, but mainly to Javanese locals, like Ari. On the island of Java, these chickens have long been kept as pets. Ari has spent 30 million rupiah, about $2,000, on 2 Ayam Cemani chickens.
Ada juga, memang kalau beli ayam cemani itu ada aja rezekinya mungkin. Entah dari anakannya atau apa itu tidak tahu, mungkin rezekinya bertambah.
Some locals believe the chicken's jet black colouring allows them to travel between the human world and the supernatural one. Another mystical belief is that consuming the very first egg one lays will help you conceive a child. Although Cemani chicken eggs are highly valuable, breeders will give these first eggs away for free, either to couples in need or to healers like Fathiatun. Here in the Temanggung Regency, Fathiatun roasts the egg until it becomes a fine powder.
Ketika sudah menjadi bubuk halus, kemudian diminum dengan madu dan diminum oleh kedua mempelai, yaitu istri dan suami. Kemudian diminum ini hanya 1 kali saja, jadi 1 kali habis 1 telur, seperti itu. tidak ada biaya, kita kasih gratis karena memang keturunan ini sangat penting dan istimewa. Karena memang telur ayam cemani pertama ya, kita sebut tembean, telur ayam tembean itu sangat langka.
Despite being used for healing, Cemani chickens themselves tend to have weak immune systems. And if a chicken gets sick, its black colour can fade and become dull. But keeping Cemani chickens healthy can get tricky, especially when there's no official guide on how to breed them. So, breeders rely on their shared knowledge, as well as constant trial and error, to breed healthy, high-quality birds. The chickens are bathed every week. This helps prevent bacterial infections. The coops are sprayed down for the same reason. Spacious coops help create a stress-free environment, but also help maintain the chicken's genetic lines. A nurse also provides the chickens with vitamins and vaccines and adjusts their feed as they develop.
Kalau ayam kampung kadang dilepas liarkan seperti itu, tanpa tahu ini nanti keturunan dari induk betina yang mana gitu.
The chicken's diet depends on their breeder. In New Jersey, Rachel adds special supplements to improve her flock's intestinal health.
One of the things that we have here is the crushed chilies. They go crazy for them. Chickens do not have the ability to taste spicy, so for them that's just like a really yummy additive. They do better to have extra protein. They just are a little bit hardier and they lay better, more eggs. The form of protein that we use are dried soldier fly larvae. They are 36% protein and they love them. Oregano leaves are antimicrobial and are super good for the chicken's intestinal health as well. So we like to add that as well. So basically they're just getting something that smells like a huge pizza.
In Indonesia, a nurse feeds his chickens a special mix of feed twice a day to help them gain weight. He also likes to add papaya and taro leaves to their food.
Kalau daun pepaya sendiri ya tujuan kita adalah untuk menambah nafsu makan, menambah daya tahan tubuh, terutama untuk mengobati cacing di ayam cemani. Nah, kalau daun talas ini biasanya untuk memacu produksi telur. Untuk memacu produksi telur supaya telurnya bagus, bertelurnya rutin, dan mungkin juga bisa meningkatkan produktivitas juga untuk daun talas.
A healthy Ayam Cemani hen lays around 100 eggs a year, which is only 40% of what most laying hens produce. These eggs can sell for as much as 250,000 rupiah, or about $16. However, breeders prefer to keep most of the eggs because not every one is guaranteed to hatch.
Karena kadang ada yang mati embrionya di usia 7 hari, mungkin ada yang mati di usia 10 hari, dan seterusnya. Kadang ada yang sudah jadi ayam tapi mati di dalam telur, seperti itu.
So it's more cost-effective to incubate the eggs and to maximize the overall chances of getting healthy chicks.
Kalau yang tadi diambil telurnya cuma butuh 2-3 minggu udah bertelur lagi. Kalau dia dari ngerami telur, dia harus memulihkan tubuh, kondisi tubuhnya terlebih dahulu. Itu bisa memakan lebih dari 4 minggu untuk dia bisa bertelur kembali.
More eggs also means more chances to breed high-quality all-black birds.
Untuk ayam cemani kualitas yang baik ini biasanya semakin besar kualitasnya semakin baik untuk kehitamannya. Tapi maksimal kepekatan itu bisa dilihat di saat usia 7-8 bulan. Akan tetapi juga kadang jengger ini, bentuk jengger ini berpengaruh juga. Antara dia agak ke sini dengan dia yang lurus seperti ini, harganya udah berbeda.
Roosters are more valuable than hens because they have wider combs. Although the COVID-19 pandemic did cause prices to drop, they've now bounced back.
Untuk kegiatan usaha ini sangat membawa keberuntungan untuk kegiatan usaha. Untuk ranah peternak atau untuk pekerjaan sambilan dan lain sebagainya ini sangat menguntungkan.
Mangoes farmed in Miyazaki are from the Irwin mango variety, a type often referred to as apple mango, as it turns red when ripe. Irwin mangoes are actually pretty common and are also grown in other parts of the world and sold at much lower prices. This is because the exclusivity of Taiyo no Tamago is not tied to which type of mango it is, but rather to the care it receives. In order to generate buzz at the auction, a mango needs bees. To increase their odds of success, farmers like Takuya usually rent bees during the flowering season. These are flowering mango plants. Bees play a crucial role in the pollination of the plants, as without them, mangoes would not grow as big as desired.
ミツバチにもよるんですけど、たくさんなった木には1本の木に200個くらいなるんで、これをまだ鳴らした方がいいからっていうので鳴らしてるんですよ。普段も落とすんですよこれ。だからマンゴー農家としてはこれ作るようじゃダメなんですね。ミツバチが交配しない場合はこういう小さい実になるんですね。もうこれ以上大きくはならないんですよ。
If a plant keeps flowering as the farmer wants, it can survive as long as 35 years. Takuya's plants are 20 years old. However, even if bees do pollinate the plants, it doesn't necessarily mean that all mangoes will qualify as Taiyo no Tamago this season. Only those that are in good shape, visibly contain pits, and are in good position will be given a chance. To successfully grow one, everything in the greenhouse needs to run smoothly. Temperature must be constant, the room ventilated, the air dehumidified, and the mangoes protected from gravity. When everything else is in place, Takuya's priority becomes the sunshine.
太陽の光が当たることによって実の色も赤い鮮やかになりますし、糖度も上がるんですね。やっぱり日陰にあると実の色も悪いですし、糖度も低くなっちゃうんで、やっぱり太陽の光はどうしても大事ですね。
If a mango slumps into the shade, Takuya will tie it with a string to bring it back up. And to make sure that sunlight touches every part of the fruit equally, he developed these light reflectors out of milk cartons.
反射板をつけることによってですね、マンゴーの実の下の方まで色がつくんですね。でこの紫のところが熟すと赤くなるんですけど、緑の部分が多いとですね、この下の方が熟しても黄色色なんで、できるだけ全てを赤にするために反射板をつけています。多分パック使われる方は今のところいないんじゃないですかね。硬いんで結構水平になるんですね。以前はもっと柔らかい紙を勧められてたんですけど、それだと下に下がっちゃうんで使いづらい部分もありましたね。
Regardless of how much it's worth, Takuya treats every mango with respect. In return, every mango repays him with a unique flavor.
甘みと酸味がある感じですね。フルーティーです。表面に傷が入ってますし、赤みも下の方まで入ってないんで、これは太陽の卵にはならないと思います。
Takuya has been growing mangoes for 16 years, a craft he learned from his father. This year, he grew 9,500 mangoes in his greenhouse.
They're now ready to be inspected to see how many of them have earned the coveted Tayo no Tamago title. The first inspection is done by human eye. Inspectors closely analyze each mango's appearance to ensure they are red all throughout, with no hints of green at the bottom. Then, a machine sorts them according to sugar content, weight, and size.
それから糖度が15度以上と重量が 350g 以上、規格で言いますと 2L 以上の基準をクリアしたものだけが太陽の卵になります。
These inspections sort the mangoes into 5 grades, 2 of which are Tayo no Tamago.
木にもよりますけど、年間でだいたいよくて 13% から 15% 程度の発生率ということですので、だいたい約全体の1割がシーズンとして太陽の卵になりますので、結構割合としては少ない方なのかなと思います。
The mangoes will now make their way to Miyazaki Central Wholesale Market for the auction. All the care and hard work that Takuya and other farmers in the prefecture put into their fruit are leading up to this very moment. The hope is to match or exceed the previous figure of 500,000 yen.
でサイトの場合ってその時期に出す方って5、6人しかいないんですね。やっぱその時のやっぱ出される方ってみんなこうライバルみたいに感じなんで、やっぱ頑張んなきゃいけないなっていうのはすごい思いますね。
本日は令和4年の宮崎マンゴー太陽の卵の解禁日となっております。
The auction has officially begun at the Miyazaki Central Wholesale Market. This year's 500,000 yen is 300,000 yen higher than last year and matches the 2019 record. And the farmer who grew these mangoes is Takuya.
すごいですよね。やったと思いましたね。
It's the third year in a row his mangoes fetched the highest price at the auction. They have been bought by a department store in Fukuoka.
そうですね、もう11時ぐらいの飛行機に私がもう手で直接持ってそのまま福岡市にある百貨店の中のうちの売り場があるんですけども、そこにも並べます。あと福岡からこの太陽の卵っていう果物を全国に知っていただきたいという思いからつけました。
Today's outcome was a successful one for Takuya. But even in a country with a strong gift-giving culture like Japan, it's not always guaranteed that such a luxury fruit will find a buyer at auction.
だからこういうコロナの状況で、いろんな消費者も物価が上がって大変だと思うんですけど、頑張ってやっぱり市場の人がですね、販売して仲卸の人が買ってもらってですね、やっぱマンゴーファンがいるんだなと。こんな状況でもコロナで大変な状況でもちょっとした値段がついても買ってもらえる状況があるなと。やっぱり自分のご褒美にしてる人がいるのかなと。
After flowering, fruiting, harvesting, and auctioning, Takuya's mango plants are ready for a new season. And the hard work isn't over yet.
花が咲いて実がなって収穫終わったらこの枝をまた戻します。一節戻してが剪定作業になります。やっぱハウスの中すごく暑いんで、その作業は結構大変ですね。こう納得いかなかったら納得いくまでこうやるみたいなところがあるんで、スポーツやってたんで負けず嫌いなところがあって、やっぱ人よりいいものを作りたいっていうのはあるんですね。それがいいのかもしれないですね。
There are a lot of types of truffle. There are at least 40 species, many of which aren't edible, and new species have been discovered as recently as 2018. You've probably seen luxury truffle products in supermarkets or fancy restaurants. but the unique truffle flavour you recognise might not be real truffle at all. Cheap truffle oil often hasn't been anywhere near a real truffle. Many cheaper truffle products use 2,4-dithiopentane, a synthesised compound containing one of the main aromatic components of foot odour, guaranteed to give it that earthy taste. Real truffles are seasonal and pricey, with a short shelf life. They were originally sniffed out using truffle pigs, but while pigs are very good at finding truffles, they're also very good at eating them too. And these days, dogs are much more common truffle hunting companions. These fungi can be found across the world, but they all require a very specific climate to grow. While different varieties may have somewhat different requirements, one thing is certain: you can't have truffles without trees.
Truffles are always found with trees, and they have to be the right type of trees. Under the ground, the truffle is just the fruiting body, so an equivalent of an apple. And we've also got a lot of then what we call the mycelium, microscopic level threads, up to 100 metres in a teaspoon of soil. And this mycelium is actually attached to the roots of a tree, like the fingers on a glove onto a hand. And it sort of extends the reach of the tree out, and it actually takes up water and nutrients and passes them through the tree, and the tree gives it sugars in return, so to help the truffles, the fruit, develop.
Even when you have exactly the right conditions, truffles aren't guaranteed, and hunting them is a labour-intensive process. Once you know where to look, you have to sniff out and dig up each truffle by hand, and they can be tricky to find.
Good boy, thank you, good boy, come. So he's told us it's there, it's still in the ground, so do I want to take it out of the ground or not? It all depends on if it's ripe. If it's unripe, there's no point in having it. So the nose comes into play, and we actually sniff the ground for it.
It may take a while, but finding a good one can make it worth the work.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah, that's probably about 70, 80 grams.
Truffles also have a short season, often appearing for only a few months of the year. And even when you do get your hands on them, they don't last for long.
An unripe truffle, unlike a tomato, which you could cut from the vine and ripen on your windowsill, once a truffle is out of the ground, the clock is ticking, it's just sort of slowly going to degrade over time. So we want to get that to customers nice and fast.
After just 5 days out of the ground, that pungent truffle smell will have halved. You can farm many truffle varieties, besides the rare Italian whites. And many people have been successful in setting up truffle orchards, but it's not easy. Trees need to be planted in the right soil conditions, inoculated with truffle fungus, and often irrigated constantly. It can take as long as 6 years before you get a good truffle harvest, and there's no guarantee that the fungi will grow at all. So after all that effort, what do they actually taste like?
Oh. The smell just made me think it was going to be really strong. The flavour's actually quite subtle. There's a nuttiness there, there's like an earthy flavour there.
Actually quite light and fragrant. It tastes a lot nicer than it smells. It smells like damp socks.
That's good. I mean, this is the first time I actually eat a truffle by itself. You know, it's a bit like mushroom, but it's more of a meaty bite.
These days, farming has taken over as our primary source of truffles, and today 70% of the world's truffles are cultivated. Through the loss of woodland and climate change, the number of wild truffles has decreased significantly. Since the 19th century, production in France has fallen from over 1,000 tonnes a season to just 30 tonnes. And climate change could mean that truffles will disappear altogether in the future.
The weather conditions are so important, not just immediately over the whole season. We're getting much lower numbers and much lower average size. A truffle is like 70% water, so it needs rainfall to help it grow. Some UK truffle scientists are thinking that your traditional areas, the climate is going to move further north, and they're not going to have a truffle industry within, I think perhaps 50 years. There's threats, there's opportunities, but rain, we do need rain. When we get a dry summer, the holidaymakers that are delighted, but I keep crossing my fingers for a bit of rain every now and again.
This is Wagyu beef, one of the most expensive meats in the world. Produced in Japan and prized for its rich marbling and buttery taste, high-grade Wagyu can cost up to $200 per pound, and the cows themselves can sell for as much as $30,000. The term Wagyu literally translates to Japanese cow, and it generally refers to 4 main breeds. These cows were bred for physical endurance, giving them more intramuscular fat cells. The fat is distributed more evenly throughout their muscle, which is why Wagyu beef looks pink and tastes so tender. And the Japanese government tightly regulates Wagyu production to protect the value and quality of the meat. Wagyu is graded on 2 main factors: how much meat can be yielded and the quality of the marbled fat. Only A3 to A5 Wagyu is certified for sale in Japan, and the higher the grade, the higher the price. Wagyu beef has gained almost legendary status, and there are many myths about Wagyu farms and the way the animals are treated, from getting daily massages to being fed beer, but these often aren't true. The cows are raised very differently in each region and by different farmers, but they're often raised by a breeder until they're about 10 months old and then sold at auction to a fattening farmer. By the time the calves are sold at auction, they can already fetch 40 times the price of US cattle. The fattening farmer will keep the animals in small pens and feed them a mixture of fibre and high-energy concentrate made from rice, wheat and hay. They're often fed this 3 times a day for almost 2 years, until the animals are almost 50% fat. Only the pregnant cows and breeding cattle are allowed to graze on pasture. The length of the fattening process and the import prices of the huge amount of concentrated feed increases the cost of the beef, and over this fattening period, each cow will eat 5 tons of feed. If and when a cow goes to auction, it can sell for as much as $30,000. Comparatively, Black Angus cattle, which are considered the cream of the crop in countries like the United States and Australia, typically don't sell for more than $3,000. And depending on the kind, the Wagyu can fetch close to $200 per pound. High marbling is the common goal, but the approach varies by farm and area. While there are more than 300 varieties of Wagyu available, the most notable cuts come from 10 regions. One of the most expensive cuts is Matsusaka Wagyu from Mie Prefecture. Made exclusively from virgin female cows and highly prized for its tenderness. In 2002, one Matsusaka cow sold for 50 million yen, or roughly $400,000. However, the best known cut of Wagyu is Kobe beef, which comes from the city of Kobe in Hyogo Prefecture, and is made exclusively from steers or castrated bulls. Although Kobe is commonly seen on US restaurant menus, customers should be wary of items like Kobe burgers, as authentic Kobe beef is too tender to be formed into a patty. Several US restaurants are actually serving hybrid Wangus beef, from domestically raised Wagyu and Angus cows. The highest ranking Wagyu is A5 Miyazaki, a 2-time winner of the Wagyu Olympics. A5 Miyazaki will cost you $100 or more per pound. At Sakamai in New York City, it's the Wagyu of choice. The restaurant is best known for serving it in an $85 katsu sando, a popular Japanese-style sandwich.
On a busy night, we probably serve about 25 of them at $85 a pop. Because Wagyu is so difficult to find in the US, yes, we do have a number of customers coming to us just to try the Wagyu. Sometimes Two Top will come and just order the sando by itself. There are a lot of tariffs and quotas on Japanese beef imports, and it's actually not allowed to import live cattle, so it is very difficult to source Wagyu.
So is it worth it? We decided to have our team give A5 Miyazaki Wagyu a try.
Holy sh**. It's so good. It's really like, it's like buttery. It's like as if it was like coated in butter, but
But it wasn't, it was literally just salt and pepper, which is crazy.
And there might be something even more sought after than the A5 Miyazaki. Hailed as the rarest steak in the world, olive Wagyu comes from cattle raised on pressed, dried olive peels mixed into their feed. It was developed in 2006 by a Japanese cattle farmer named Masaki Ishii. Only about 2,200 of these cows were slaughtered in 2018, and they all live on the island of Shodoshima, home to Japan's oldest olive oil plantation. This special Wagyu is said to be extra tender, and can cost anywhere from $120 to over $300 for a steak. While Wagyu's popularity grows worldwide, the domestic picture is a little different. Wagyu's popularity in Japan is actually slumping slightly, and the country imported more US beef than any other country as of 2017. The value of Japanese exports of Wagyu has risen over 200% in the past 5 years. And as Japan's population ages, farmers are struggling to keep up with the increased global demand, raising prices even more. But the high cost hasn't discouraged international sales. In 2013, Japan exported 5 billion yen worth of Wagyu. Last year, exports hit 24.7 billion yen. And many producers are now getting halal certifications for their slaughterhouses, so they can export to Muslim countries. However, Japan may eventually have some competition when it comes to producing high-quality Wagyu. Countries like the US, Australia, and the UK have been working on breeding their own Wagyu, usually relying on crossbreeding. Most British, American, and Australian Wagyu are only 50% purebred, but that may be changing soon. In the UK, for example, the Wagyu Breeders Association now registers DNA-verified full-blood Wagyu bulls and certifies authentic British Wagyu. New methods and increased regulation may result in a product as good as the original, which means that there soon could be a lot more Wagyu that costs a lot less. Mānuka honey is known for being earthier, richer, and more viscous than many other honeys. It comes from the nectar of the flower Leptospermum sciparium, also known as Mānuka, which is only native to New Zealand. And Mānuka, in fact, is a Maori word.
The fact that it comes from New Zealand, that gives it a premium just to start with. And because the bee travels up to about 6 kilometres to collect this honey. And so this honey is representative of the environment, and that environment is of New Zealand, Aotearoa. The plant itself and the honey is very, very rare. Out of all the honeys in the world, it probably represents 1% of all the world honeys. It's difficult to harvest. It's only a 2 to 6 week harvesting period, and the flower is only open freely for 12 days. And in New Zealand we have wind and we have rain and all the rest of it. So there's a lot of luck involved in getting the bee, or a lot of effort from the beekeeper. And for some years there is no honey production for some beekeepers. And we have to go to the big extent also of using helicopters to collect this honey.
Although Mānuka bushes can also be found in Australia, New Zealand accounts for almost all of the world's production, with exports worth $204 million and expected to quadruple to $800 million by 2028. New Zealand's honey is protected by a quality standard that safeguards Mānuka's special properties.
This honey is an expensive honey, and anything that is expensive, people will try and copy. People will try and mimic, or people will try and cheat. So a lot of the cost here isn't actually in the protection of it, or the research, so we know it's unique, we know it's from New Zealand. We can identify it. We've put labs around the world to be able to do this identification. The New Zealand government has set up a standard to say what is Mānuka honey.
So, how does the grading system work, and what exactly are you looking for in Mānuka honey? We spoke to Dr. Adrian Charlton from Fairer Science, a lab in the north of England where Mānuka honey is tested to identify its unique compounds.
As standard, we will test for 3 compounds: dihydroxyacetone, which is known as DHA, methylglyoxal, known as MgO, and hydroxymethylfurfural, HMF. These are the basic tests that we would undertake to make sure that Mānuka honey contains the antimicrobial characteristics that the consumer would expect. We can detect them, but we can also measure the concentration of them, and that's done using UV light to detect at a particular wavelength the individual compounds. Each compound has slightly different properties. But because of the issues in the past with potential fraud, there's a suite of other tests, including tests for compounds such as leptosperin, which is a marker that's unique to the nectar of Leptospermum sciparium. We can trace then the honey back to its botanical origin, the plant that it came from.
When you pick up a jar of Mānuka honey, the markers can be confusing. So how do you know that it's the real deal?
So in some cases they're labelling for the concentration of a compound, so MgO 300 would indicate 300 milligrams of methylglyoxal in that particular pot of honey per kilogram, to NPA, which is non-peroxide activity. Now that's related to the methylglyoxal concentration, but it's a more direct measure of the antimicrobial activity of the honey. Other marks, such as UMF, are quality mark, that if you can see a particular stamp on a product that it's been tested and assured to a certain standard, so that's different to actually labelling it with the concentration of a particular compound.
Another factor that's driving up the price is the use of Mānuka honey in health and beauty products. Its antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties are said to soothe and nourish the skin. And it's also said to help with blemishes and acne. But is that really the case?
There's been a number of studies that have tried to determine the health benefits of Mānuka honey, and there are some very positive results. And certainly in terms of antimicrobial activity, we can show that Mānuka honey has antimicrobial activity in the laboratory. Those clinical trials over a long period of time have not been undertaken as of yet, but there are lots of reports that indicate that Mānuka honey has benefits, but as yet unproven.
So the jury's still out on Mānuka's medicinal properties, but that hasn't stopped its popularity, and Mānuka honey is serious business. The prices and demand for the honey are so high that the New Zealand police have received hundreds of reports of beehives or honey being stolen, and even reports of bees being poisoned. So if you do manage to get your hands on a jar, does it actually taste different from normal honey?
Oh my god, that is delicious. The flavour is really strong.
It's very thick compared to normal honey.
It's got a kind of chestnutty flavour. It's not as sweet as usual honey. It's really smooth.
And the taste is pretty similar to what I'm used to. The texture is really interesting. It's very, very thick, almost like creamy.
Is Mānuka honey really worth 100 times more than other honey? That's for you to judge. But what's for certain is that no other honey in the world is so rare and unique that it needs to pass by a lab before being sold.
Tourists visit Kusamba and nearby regions for their famous volcanic sands. But for Nunga's family, they've been an essential source of income for at least 4 generations. She starts her day at 6 in the morning, leveling sand for about an hour. It's no easy task, even for Nunga, who's been doing this since she was just 15 years old. She and her husband make up to 40 round trips every day to collect water from the ocean. The baskets of seawater can weigh 66 pounds.
Even
on a calm day like today, it's hard to keep the balance against a swelling tide, so she tries to collect water from smaller waves. After 30 years, she can go back and forth for hours without a break, even as temperatures reach as high as 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The manual labor drove some farmers to replace the buckets for machines that can pump that much water in just minutes. But Nunga hasn't installed one yet. This fine volcanic sand sets Kusamba farm salt apart from other kinds, like that from salt ponds or rock deposits. It absorbs the water fast, like a natural sieve, leaving sun-baked salt flakes on the surface. Nunga is careful to spread the water evenly, because the salt won't crystallize if there's too much water in one area. On a sunny day like today, the water will dry by the afternoon, and she collects it immediately. Most of the tools they use are made from local resources, like this wooden rake. But it's an industry dependent on the fickle weather. Farmers can spend weeks without income during the rainy season between October and April. And erosion is slowly swallowing up this beach. Kusamba's beach coastline shrank 32.74 meters in just 7 years. That's nearly 5 meters a year, the second worst rate in this region of Bali. It's forced many farmers to rely on man-made sea defenses. All this risk and uncertainty is why Nunga's husband has taken a second job in construction, and why the couple doesn't want their 2 children following them into the salt fields. Still, Nunga says she enjoys it, and she works hard to maintain the business she inherited from her ancestors. Nunga filters the salt in her hut. She uses seawater to flush all of the salt from the sand and runs it through a filtration system 3 times until the salt is pure. She pours the concentrated salt water into these troughs. They're called Palung, and they're what give the salt its name. Traditional ones are made from coconut tree trunks. But Nunga also uses these synthetic sheets that help the water dry faster. This is the only part of the process that she's modernized. More and more, farmers have been switching to these because they're cheaper and don't leak. But farmers like Wayan Rena think it's important to stick to this traditional palung.
Harus kembali ke palung. Nah, itulah yang disebut organik. Itulah yang disebut alami. Alat jemurnya.
Palung like these can last up to 30 years. This kind of solar evaporation is one of the oldest and most traditional techniques of harvesting salt. In about 1 or 2 days, the water will be gone, leaving behind pyramid-shaped crystals. The natural sea salt is said to be higher in nutritional value than the average table salt, which is often heavily refined. Farmers describe the flavor as subtle and not overwhelmingly salty. And this is the only salt Nunga grew up eating. While Indonesia has one of the longest coastlines in the world, bad weather and coastal changes have affected salt production. Kusamba farmers typically produce between 300 and 600 kilograms of salt a month. But Indonesia imports about 2 million tons of cheaper salt every year, meaning the farmers have stiff competition. Farmers sell 1 kilo of Palung dried salt for about $2. That's more than 3 times the price of mass-produced salt sold in most grocery stores, making it a luxury item for the majority of people. That leaves farmers with unsold stock. Wayan leads a network for local salt farmers, and he helps artisans like Nunga sell their salt. Salt farmers have been turning to tourists who are willing to pay for more than just the salt itself.
Yang tamu dia cari apanya yang cari? Kan tradisinya. Bukan garamnya yang dia beli mahal. Karena cara pembuatannya masih tradisi.
The decline of tourism during the pandemic was a major setback for them. And without the promise of a consistent livable wage, this generation of farmers could be the last to continue this trade.
Bapak berusaha untuk membangkitkan anak-anak muda. Mulai sekarang mudah-mudahan lah. Kenapa? Karena Bapak ingin melestarikan warisan.
Kusamba salt farmers received a geographical indication certificate from the Indonesian government in early 2022. It recognizes that a product comes from a particular place and has a unique reputation because of that. Farmers hope the international prestige of the certificate will boost export sales.
Nah, Bapak yakin untuk ke depan pasti akan cerah.
Panten katikuangan uyah sambil berusaha dan pang ada nak nyusukin. Kada cak kapang mau nak nyakap, mau nak depan aja. Tadi dak.
I love very dark maple syrup. It's got these beautiful notes of like toffee and caramel. It's a little buttery, and it's got that really strong maple flavor, which I really like. I love it obviously on pancakes, on waffles, but it's really great too to slather on some ribs too. So adding that sweetness, that maple flavor.
The basics of making maple syrup are all the same. You boil sap, but from tree to like jug of syrup, there's a lot of different variables in that process that affect the taste as well.
Jeffrey and his wife, Ashley Ruprecht, have been making syrup for almost a decade. They produce limited batches of syrup that have been tapped, wood-fired, and bottled right here on their 50-plus acre farm in the Hudson Valley. Outside of Vermont, New York has the most tappable maple trees in the US.
Currently, we have around 1,200 trees, so we're not a huge farm. It's still manageable for my husband and I.
Though many may associate it with autumn, maple syrup is actually a product of spring. During the summer months, the maple tree absorbs energy from the sun as well as water and minerals from the soil. Starch is then created and stored in the roots through the winter. In spring, as the snow begins to melt, the starch turns to sugar or sucrose and circulates throughout the tree. And it's the ideal time for Jeffrey to tap. While most of the trees are sugar maples, they also pull sap from other types.
Really, sugar maples are the predominant species that are tapped. Just because the sugar content in the sap itself is so high, I would say 25 to 30% red maples we tap, and then the rest are sugar maples.
To be tapped, a maple tree needs to reach at least 40 years old, but they can live for up to 400 years, and if tapped properly, producers like Jeffrey can reuse the same tree for decades.
There's no harm to the tree. You want to tap where there's not any major large knots or flaws or anything above. Like good crowns, good diameter of the tree, healthy tree, no rotten spots and stuff like that. So this is a really good spot. And when tapping, it's super important to go as quick as possible in and out, make sure all the wood comes out. And you have a clear tap hole that's nice and round, you're good to go.
For Jeffrey to collect the sap, a couple of factors need to be just right. The sap is ready when the temperature is above freezing during the day and below freezing at night. Wind can also affect the flow of the sap.
Today is a really good day. We had a nice hard freeze last night and it's warm today, so that pressure in the tree is really pushing sap out, so it's a really, really good day.
Jeffrey drives a spout 1.5 to 2.5 inches deep into a hole 5/16 of an inch wide. He then fits every tree with a tube like this one. In Jeffrey's and Ashley's forest, lines of tubes transport sap to a sugar house for processing. In the US, there are 3 grades of maple syrup: substandard, processing grade, and the highest quality, Grade A. To be sold as Grade A, it needs to contain no more than 68.9% solids, have a consistent colour, and contain no sediment. In comparison, cheap commercial table syrup can contain anything from artificial colourings to harmful chemicals.
So table syrup, that is actually not maple syrup. It's usually corn syrup or cane syrup, maybe a little bit of maple flavoring added to it because it's not from a maple tree at all.
For Grade A, the time of year also affects the quality of the syrup. The earlier in the season it's harvested, the lighter the syrup.
It's all the same process to produce these colors. It's the sap that changes throughout the season that actually changes the color and the taste of the syrup. Usually we'll start out with a lighter syrup, a golden, an amber, and you usually end on very dark syrup at the end of the season.
Today, Ashley and Jeffrey will likely harvest Grade A very dark.
It's the darkest color that we produce as well, which has the strongest maple flavor, and that is really popular for us here.
On the market, these factors are reflected in the price, with Jeffrey and Ashley's premium syrups going for a little over $200 per gallon. Premium syrups are so valuable that between 2011 and 2012, 6 million gallons worth over $14 million were stolen from producers in the Canadian province of Quebec, the world's largest supplier of maple syrup. The heist was so large that it affected the global supply. It remains to this day the most valuable heist in Canadian history, known as the Great Maple Syrup Heist. In the US, table syrup is still the first choice, with 75% of consumers preferring it over pure maple syrup. But here in the Hudson Valley, premium syrup like Jeffrey and Ashley's has no equals.
I grew up in the 5th generation restaurateurs in the Hudson Valley. There is more of an increase in the demand for the maple syrup. I find that it's drawing an influx of people and an attention to the Hudson Valley. I think that the usage of both the red maple and the sugar maple trees does have a little bit more of a well-rounded flavor to it. I typically use the dark maple syrup, being kind of a middle of the road. It has an excellent flavor profile that does pair well with sweet dishes, savory dishes. You just simply can't get that same flavor profile or balance from honey or any other type of sweeteners. The maple, almost that oaky type flavor does carry through with it and balances very well. Grade A, I find, suits very well for multiple applications.
Back at the farm, Jeffrey and Ashley get ready to begin evaporating and filtering the freshly drawn sap. To get the sap up the evaporator in the sugar house, it first needs to reach this building, the sap house. With the help of a vacuum, the network of tubes carries it to a giant stainless steel collection tank.
The first point of entry gets pulled into this big bin, and we have pumps going all the way up to our sugar house up there, which pushes sap up into there, and that's where we evaporate.
It's pumped up to the sugar house to a larger holding tank. This is where filtration and evaporation begin. Ashley and Jeffrey's farm runs on a wood evaporator.
We boil as hot as we can get our firebox. We are testing it constantly. You're measuring the bricks of the syrup, which is basically the viscosity of the syrup, making sure it gets to the correct density.
When it's pulled from the tree and before reaching the evaporator, sap contains 98% water and 2% sugar. By the time it evaporates, it should be ready at 33% water and 67% sugar. Precision is key here. Jeffrey needs to make sure the syrup reaches exactly 68.9% density.
We'll just boil away most of the water content from the sap until it reaches the perfect maple syrup consistency. Because once you evaporate too much of the water content out of the sap, it goes from syrup to like a candy to a sugar.
Many farms today, especially larger ones, tend to use oil-powered evaporators. Neither method affects the taste of the syrup, but the wooden evaporator is more labor-intensive, which is another factor that drives up the price.
We do have a lot of storms that come through, so a lot of the trees that do fall, we use the firebox to evaporate.
From sap to finished syrup, Jeffrey and Ashley have to be mindful of the entire process.
Trees can fall on your main line. You can have a pretty catastrophic day if that happens. All of your syrup is just pouring out of your main line. You definitely have to be paying attention unless you have a lot of automated systems going, and even then sometimes things happen.
But there is one thing that can't be controlled: the weather. Recently, warming temperatures and changes in freeze and thaw cycles have affected maple trees and syrup production and the quality of Ashley and Jeffrey's products.
We've seen a change even in just these few years. Long periods of freezing in the middle of the season are really hard because you could have 2 weeks where it's a really hard freeze and sap is not flowing, and then a few weeks later it's really warm and the trees just stop producing sap. So the seasons have become shorter, but we're also seeing every year we're tapping a little earlier and seeing sap flows a little earlier too. So the season might be moving a little earlier as well and ending earlier too.
Despite the challenges, maple syrup farms like Ashley and Jeffrey's in New York continue to thrive.
We're a great support system for each other, and it's always nice to walk out your back door and be in your sugarwoods and business.
Kenji starts his work at the Sakamoto Kurozu facility at 8 a.m. He's been working here for the past 40 years.
非常にこのやりがいのある仕事で、楽しんでおります。今は醸造部といってですね、 仕込みから、黒酢を仕上げるまでですね。
Brown rice is one of only 3 ingredients in kurozu. Workers harvest it from nearby fields.
これは私がですね、生まれ育った地元で採れたお米です。
They steam the rice and mix it with a mold that's also used to make sake and soy sauce. This is called goji, and it's the first ingredient to go in the jar.
いわば、黒酢を作るための原動力になる麹なんですね。
Genji fills up the rest with plain steamed brown rice. It makes the vinegar less tangy and acidic. Then, he fills the pot with around 9 gallons of fresh water from a natural spring.
麹の、働きを活性化させるために地下水を入れます。
A final layer of koji goes on top. It will later turn into a thick slab of mold that protects the vinegar from other microbes entering the mixture. Master brewers usually fill the jars up in the spring and fall, when the temperatures are just right.
やっぱり、先ほど言いましたけど、温度が非常に大事でありまして。
This specific region has the perfect climate to make kurozu because of its relatively warm weather year-round. The natural outdoor heat accelerates fermentation. Over a 3 to 6 month process, the mold turns the rice starch into sugar, then into alcohol. As the vinegar ages, it turns darker and richer in taste. It takes at least 3 years to reach its signature brownish hue. Genji checks all 52,000 pots to keep track of the aging.
最初に感じるのは匂いなんですね。最初の発酵の時に甘い香りがするのを確認した時にはすごく大丈夫だな、これで安心だなという気持ちです。これはもう一人前になっております。香りとか、それから色とか、それから味とかですね。それで判断していきます。
Each pot ages at its own pace, but most reach the dark brown colour in 3 years. Genji selects a few to ferment for up to 5, and those are the most expensive.
壺の蓋を開けるとですね、ほんのりと甘く感じます。その後にですね、ブクブクと音がいたします。最初は音がポコッポコッポコッという音がするんですが、もう少し発酵が進んできますとガーッという激しい音に変わります。
The company sells vinegar at all stages of aging. These ceramic pots also play an essential role in the process. Their dark exterior absorbs heat from the sun, and the porousness of the clay allows the mold to keep fermenting. Sakamoto Kurozu has been buying them from Chinjukan pottery for the past 200 years, and they last for centuries. The company still has about 1,000 original pots from 2 centuries ago.
黒酢の甕は、何千個も作ってますね。
Chinjukan is a 15th generation potter running the 420-year-old family business.
ここの焼き物は坂本の黒酢とはもう江戸時代から、長い付き合いですね。
People have been making black vinegar in Fukuyama since the 1800s. In the early 20th century, there were about 24 kurozu makers here, but many closed their doors during World War II when the government implemented food rations and restricted brewers from using rice. Sakamoto Kurozu managed to stay afloat by briefly substituting sweet potatoes for rice. Today, it's one of only 8 kurozu businesses left. It's also one of the largest, covering 35,000 square meters, the size of more than 6 American football fields. Akihiro Sakamoto is the 6th generation to run the family business.
私は祖父がですね、非常に私は小さい頃から非常に苦労して手間がかかるんですけれども、黒酢作りやっぱり時代とともに形を変えながら未来英語を残していけるように頑張っていきたいと思っています。
It also has a restaurant on site where visitors can taste the vinegar.
坂本黒酢の違いは、店頭で売られている安いお酢とは全く製法も原料も違うので、全然違う商品となっております。まろやかでコクのある風味が出ています。
Junichi Honda studied the best way to use vinegar in his dishes. Like miso and soy sauce, rice vinegar is one of the basic seasonings used in Japanese cuisine. It's usually aged for 3 months, and some can be ready in just days with modern technology. Kurozu's years-long natural process gives it a milder and less acidic taste than regular rice vinegar. The restaurant's sweet and sour pork is the most popular item on the menu.
こちらが自家製の1年ものの黒酢となっております。主に火を使う料理で使用しております。こちらの黒酢を少し火を入れて使用することによって、黒酢の風味、コクが増し、さらに美味しい酢豚に仕上がります。
A 1,000 milliliter bottle of kurozu costs around $20. That's double the price of standard mass-produced rice vinegar. The older it is, the more expensive it becomes. But Akihiro is not worried about cheaper competitors. Japan's Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries certified kurozu with a geographical indication in 2015. That means authentic kurozu can only be made here in this region using these techniques, just like champagne can only be produced in a certain region of France. And nowadays, Akihiro has chefs and customers from across the country seeking his vinegar year-round. The company expanded its line to include vinegar-based products like jam, ponzu sauce, and flavored drinks.
でさらにそれを今度坂本の黒酢を原料にして今の時代に合った商品開発をしてですね。
Customers buy kurozu for its supposed health benefits like weight loss, lower cholesterol, and increased energy. Studies suggest people who use it regularly see benefits, but usually when paired with other healthy lifestyle habits. But there's no simple way of expanding. Most of the land in Fukuyama is already taken, and moving the business somewhere else would mean losing the geographical indication. The company also needs a flat area to lay out pots, and the terrain here is hilly and steep. And there's no way of accelerating the natural fermentation process or changing the size of the pots. So for now, he's making as much as the 52,000 pots can produce.
このビジネスはなくなることはありません。この黒酢の製法では今のところライバルはありません。
And none of that is possible without veteran brewmasters like Kenji, ensuring that the quality is top-notch.
私は黒酢作りを長年やってますが、すごくこのやりがいのある仕事なんで、自分の子供たちにもですね、やってほしい、継いでほしいという気持ちはあります。
People in China have been eating bird nests for more than 1,000 years. It's believed to have near magical properties, from curing cancer to helping children grow taller. And the main ingredient? The partially dissolved nest of a swiftlet, a small bird native to Southeast Asia. 3 times a year, swiftlets build nests out of their sticky saliva on cave walls and cliff sides where they raise their young. It's the high cost of these saliva nests that makes bird nest soup so expensive. Here in New York City's Chinatown, for example, a couple dozen were selling for more than $1,000. Until recently, the most common way of getting the nests was by harvesting them from the wild.
There are many dangers involved in harvesting nests from caves. They would climb up without really any safety nets or harnesses, that kind of thing. and just try and extract the nest from the cave wall, and they'd be, in some cases, many stories up.
But for many, the risk was worth the reward.
Harvesters would often try and collect as many nests as they could, regardless of whether they were fully formed, and they would just take them repeatedly.
In some regions, swiftlets couldn't compete with the rate of harvest, and so their populations plummeted. Between 1957 and 1997, the number of swiftlets declined by as much as 88% in parts of Southeast Asia, largely due to overharvesting. And as a result, the price of bird nests skyrocketed.
The price for bird nests, I would say, peaked in around the early 1990s.
Around that time, nests were selling for up to $1,000 a pound. Adjusting for inflation, that would be around $2,000 today. Those high prices earned bird nests the title caviar of the East. And they also fueled a new industry. You could call it hospitality. Scores of people across Southeast Asia, looking to cash in on the bird nest trade, started investing in swiftlet hotels.
People just found that if there was a vacant building, or say the upper story of a building was uninhabited, and swiftlets would make their way inside, and they would just start using the buildings as their nesting sites. And then these rumors kind of emerged over time about how much money you could make swiftlet farming really overnight.
And they weren't just rumors. In Myanmar, for example, swiftlet hotels can bring in at least $6,000 a year, while the average annual income is just over $1,100. And the more swiftlets you draw in, the more money you make.
我根据当地人跟我说的话，他有几个条件。所以第一个，他们相信要做善事。你收集这个燕窝的时候，你要也肯的施舍，你施舍越多，那燕子会来的越多。第二个就是你要有科技，因为科技分为你要知道燕子它们的那种知道它声音怎么样吸引燕子飞来你的那个所造的燕窝。好，那第三就是它也要有爱心，因为燕子的时候，它们不能为了要很快拿到燕窝，还没有那小燕子还没孵出的时候，就把那个鸟蛋拿掉，然后就把燕窝收集。
In the last few decades, the swiftlet farming industry has exploded. From 1998 to 2013, the estimated number of swiftlet hotels grew from 900 to 60,000 in Malaysia alone. But while this increased supply, it didn't exactly slash the price. That's because in the last couple of decades or so, demand has also increased.
More people could afford it, more people could access it.
So while there are more bird nests today, they're not much easier to come by. And that's why bird nest soup is still so pricey, selling for over $100 a bowl at some restaurants. But the question on all of our minds was, is it worth it?
I'm gonna go. You ready? You like it? It's really good. I think we can add more vinegar and yeah, pepper.
Can you taste any of bird nest at all?
I mostly taste like crab, and then there's that jello type texture in the bag, and that I'm guessing that's a bird's nest.
Yeah.
It's really good.
It doesn't taste like anything.
No.
But then again, that's not the point. People sip it up for the alleged health benefits it offers. And there may be some truth to them. One study suggests that bird nest soup may possess anti-inflammatory properties. And another concluded that it may help reduce the side effects of chemotherapy. Plus, it's rich in protein. In fact, swiftlet nests are 40 to 50% protein. So if nothing else, it would make for a nutritious snack, albeit an expensive one.
Even in the diverse world of cheese, poulet is unique. There's only one place in the world that makes it, and that's on this farm in the Zasavisa Special Nature Reserve. Slobodan Simic founded the reserve 24 years ago in Serbia. It's one of just 3 areas in all of former Yugoslavia that protects a special endangered breed of Balkan donkey. Poulet is made with 60% donkey milk and 40% goat milk, and it requires months and many donkeys to produce it.
Sve je slučajno I ništa nije slučajno. Osnovna naša ideja kad su magarci u pitanju da tu vrstu koja je spala ispod 1000 jedinki u Srbiji spasemo. Tad smo rešili da napravim prvu farmu muznih magarica. Dakle, ovdje su, poenta je na muznim magaricama. Proizvode, a kad smo došli do 200 magarica, kad smo imali višak mleka, onda sam ja mislio da treba da pravimo I sir.
There are only about 20 donkeys that produce milk on the farm at a time, and even then, each one won't produce much. Each donkey is milked carefully by hand 3 times a day. If the farmers don't empty all of the milk, the donkeys won't continue making it.
Mi smo probali da muzemo i mašinski magarice, ali je to ispostavilo se nemoguće, zato što ona nije namenjena kao krava da daje mleko, nego samo pule sisa i zato kad se stavi muzni aparat, ona blokira i neće da da mleko.
Today, farmers care for 250 donkeys, but they can't always take milk from all of them. Similar to cows, a female donkey will only produce milk once it's had a baby, and each one carries a baby for a year and 2 weeks. Then farmers must wait another 3 months once the baby has taken milk for itself, before they can begin gathering their own to make cheese. They need 6.6 gallons of milk in total to make just 1 kilogram of cheese, and a donkey produces under 1 gallon of milk per day. That's far less than what comes from a cow, which can produce as much as 15 gallons of milk a day. Each donkey will only produce milk for 6 months. Then you must wait another year to collect milk from that same donkey again. Poulet is only sold on this farm and a few others the reserve partners with, another factor that ups the final value. The farm can produce between 50 and 70 kilograms of cheese a year, but Slobodan only ever sells about a third of that. And it's not just because of Poulet's staggering price. You couldn't legally buy Poulet cheese in some parts of the world even if you wanted to.
Stojke i pije se isključivo nekuvano to mleko, što je isto dodatni problem za plasiranje tog mleka u Evropsku uniju, jer nepasterizovano, nekuvano mleko se ne može prodavati u Evropskoj uniji. A ovo ako se pasterizuje, onda se izgube svi ti dragoceni sastojci i onda je to obična stvar koja nije vredna.
Technically, Poulet cheese can be produced with milk from any type of donkey, and therefore any farm that raises donkeys. But there's one major roadblock. Just having donkey's milk doesn't mean you have all you need to make this cheese. Poulet is made in a very specific way, using a recipe only Slobodan and one other person in the world knows. It's because donkey milk contains less fat than the milk of other animals, which means it holds less of the protein casein that allows many other cheeses to coagulate on their own. The recipe requires goat milk and a secret mix of additives and bacteria. This is what allows the milk to form curds, an essential stage of any cheese-making process. Without this, it wouldn't be possible to make poulet at all.
Pa ne može da napravi niko, ne samo kod kuće, nego su poznati stručnjaci za mleko iz raznih zemalja pokušavali to da naprave i nisu uspeli. Zato što je ono što je tehnolog smislio, to su dodaci određenih bakterija i drugih supstanci koji uspeju da zgrušaju to mleko, koje inače malo ima to kazeina koji služi za zgrušavanje mleka, i onda su mnogi probali, ali niko nije uspeo da napravi.
The cheese is finally placed into 50-gram molds to age for a few days. Once removed from the molds, it's set in another room to age for at least a month more. The final product is crumbly and soft with a rich flavor.
Pravo, jedinstveno I posebno.
The cost of preserving the donkey species is another element to keep in mind when considering poulet's huge value. Slobodan must maintain the land, buy food for the donkeys, and hire workers to care for them. In a year, he spends about $100,000 just to keep the farm running. And unless producing poulet becomes easier, or someone else in the world discovers how to make it, nothing is likely to bring down the price of this incredibly rare Serbian cheese.
10년 전만 해도 감태 하면 뭐야 도대체 사람들이 감퇴? 막 이렇게까지 심지어 얘기해가지고 제가 되게 좀 속상했었는데 이제는 이제 젊은 친구들도 감태 하면은 아 뭔가 고급 레스토랑에서 쓰이는 좀 비싼 거 이런 인지가 생기고.
But before reaching restaurant kitchens, Gamtae's journey starts on the freezing cold western shoreline of South Korea's Garorim Bay. Unlike other types of edible seaweed like nori that can be farmed, Gamtae can only grow in the wild on mudflats, coastal wetlands that form when ocean tides wash in sediment and mud.
그러니까 감태 같은 경우는 해조류인데도 불구하고 다른 해조류들은 이제 바닷물에 둥둥 떠서 있는데 지금 보시면 감태는 여기 이렇게 뿌리를 내리고 있는 게 잘 보이거든요. 그러니까 사실 해조류임에도 뭐 야채와 채소 같은 성격을 가지고 있는 굉장히 좀 독특한 해조류라고 보시면 됩니다.
Because of this, Gamtae can only be harvested by hand. Any other way could destroy the root of the plant, impacting the supply for next year.
채취를 할 때 뿌리는 내버려두고 중간에 끊어서 좀 채취를 해야 나중에 걔네들이 또 자라고 하는 과정들이 있거든요.
Since Gamtae can go bad if exposed to high temperatures for too long, harvesting happens from December to March, when the sea is the coldest. For these 4 months, Joo-hyun and her team must collect as much Gamtae as possible to meet demand from buyers for the rest of the year. They can spend 6 hours a day pulling Gamtae from the mudflats.
그러니까 추운 거랑 물에 잘 빠지는 거, 그 다음에 이렇게 쭈그려 앉다 보니까 정말 늘 이렇게 허리가 되게 아프더라고요. 작업하다 보니까. 손만 시려운 게 아니라 발도 시렸고, 그리고 지금은 안 그런데 정말 갯벌에 칼바람이 장난 아니거든요.
The intense harvesting process is only the first difference between Gamtae and more common nori seaweed. Compared to nori's dark green colour and slightly coarse feel, Gamtae's bright green, fine strands have a more delicate texture. This laborious process is just one of the reasons Gamtae costs so much more than other seaweeds, and relying on the rhythms of nature means supply can be unpredictable.
이게 자연산이다 보니까 이게 안 나도 제가 할 수 있는 일은 없고 사실은 그렇거든요.
Recently, warming sea temperatures have disrupted the growth.
올해 같은 경우가 굉장히 어려웠는데 지금 좀 듬성듬성 감태가 있잖아요. 그래서 올해는 수확량이 예전에 거의 3분의 1밖에 안 되는 것 같아요.
To make up the difference, Joo-hyun buys Gamtae from local fishermen who collect it.
지금 저희가 감태 작업하시는 가구는 한 50가구 이상 같이 하고 있어요. 제가 나올 때 좀 매집을 많이 해두는 편입니다.
Gamtae also has a richer, more pungent flavor than nori.
감태가 굉장히 매력적인 게 되게 달달하면서도 좀 쌉스름한 향이 있거든요. 그래서 달달하면서 좀 쌉스름한 게 다른 해조류랑은 되게 좀 다른 특성이 있는 것 같아요.
But that flavor comes with a price tag. An 8-sheet pack of Gamtae costs $16. 50 sheets of nori can be bought for the same price. But whether it's harvested by workers or locals, all the Gamtae has to be washed back at the factory. It's the most crucial part of processing because any mud, debris or critters left on the seaweed could affect how it tastes in the end.
그리고 얘는 이제 각각류 새끼 같은 거예요. 사실 이게 자연산이다 보니까 이런 것들이 조금씩 있을 수가 있는데 이제 특히나 저희가 공급하고 있는 데가 파인다이닝이나 호텔이나 이런 백화점이나 이런 쪽이 되게 많은데 컴플레인이 걸리면 절대 안 되거든요.
Years ago, workers would have done this completely by hand, but this washing machine can clean 100 kilograms in less than 10 minutes. It's just one of the changes Joo-hyun made to the Gamtae processing techniques she learned from her father.
그러니까 제가 이제 회사 생활을 접고 서산으로 내려와서 아버지한테 아빠 제가 감태를 만들어서 팔겠습니다라고 했을 때 아버지가 처음에 코웃음 치셨거든요.
Like many locals, Joo-hyun's father, Chol Soo-song, grew up eating Gamtae. But one day, he was struck with a new idea for processing it.
애가 이제 구워서 먹어보고 떠서 이제 보고 하니까 그때도 부가스 있고 좋더라고. 그래서 그때부터 이제 감태를 시작을 한 거야. 이제 김같이 떠서.
Joo-hyun and her team of 15 still use his techniques to process Gamtae at 바다숲.
그래서 아직도 저는 좀 어려워하고 지금도 아버지한테 틈틈이 배우고 있습니다.
Workers use a technique called harrowing to form the Gamtae into paper-thin sheets. They submerge a handful of the seaweed in fresh water and mould it on top of a bamboo mat. While it may look simple, this technique can take 3 years to master.
사실 저도 몇 번 연습을 했는데 잘 안 되긴 하더라고요. 쉽지 않습니다, 이 작업이. 또 너무 두껍거나 너무 얇지도 않게 적당한 양을 잘 피는 게 되게 어렵더라고요. 우선은 여기 이제 빈 공간이 없는 거가 되게 중요하고 또 너무 이렇게 뭉쳐있지 않는 게 되게 중요하거든요.
Joo-hyun uses this press to remove excess water from the Gamtae.
물이 좀 잘 빠져야 이제 건조가 좋아지니까 또 건조를 오래 하게 되면은 상품의 이제 색감이나 이렇게 질이 조금 떨어질 수 있어서.
The sheets dry the rest of the way in these dryers. Bada Soup sells Gamtae sheets either raw or roasted at 230 degrees Celsius for 10 seconds.
구운 감태 같은 경우는 저희가 함초 자염이랑 참기름, 옥배요 요 세 가지를 부어 같이 믹스해가지고 양념을 합니다.
Bada Soup produces 3,500 sheets of Gamtae in a single day and exports roughly 500,000 each year. But carving out a market for Gamtae outside of Seosan was anything but easy.
저는 저희가 공장을 만들고 감태를 맛있게 만들면 사람들이 알아서 찾아서 사줄 거라고 생각을 했거든요. 근데 제가 창업을 하고 2014년도에는 저희가 매출이 진짜 빵원이었어요.
Joo Hyun knew the only way to create a market for the seaweed was to teach people about it.
그래서 제가 그때부터 했던 게 감태가 뭔지 이걸 좀 알려야 되겠다라는 생각을 해서 감태가 무엇인가, 또 감태는 어떻게 먹으면 좋은가, 감태가 왜 귀한 음식인가, 좀 이런 것들을 알리는 데 많은 초점을 뒀습니다.
She focused on promoting it to the high-end market, sending samples of Gamtae to Michelin-starred chefs and writing articles describing its unique taste and texture. Eventually, her years of tireless promotion paid off. Joo Hyun says she began getting inquiries from chefs around the world.
그러다 보니까 한국에 대한 관심도 높아진 데다가 제가 만나본 셰프님들은 식재료에 대한 열망이 굉장히 크시더라고요. 특히나 처음 보는 식재료, 다른 사람들이 안 쓰는 식재료에 대한 열망이 굉장히 크셔가지고 감태를 소개해드렸을 때 셰프님들의 반응이 정말 눈이 반짝반짝 하시면서 이런 것도 있었냐라고 굉장히 좋아하시더라고요.
One of them is Chris Palung. He's the chef owner of the restaurant Francie in Brooklyn, New York. It's one of several Michelin-starred restaurants that sources Gamtae through Bada Soup.
It's got this like robust aroma. It's like an oceanic white truffle, is what I always describe it to people.
Chris has been using Gamtae in his dishes for the last 10 years. It's a key ingredient in one of the restaurant's signature dishes, conchiglie.
Here we are in the kitchen. We're about to start making our actual pasta, the conchiglie itself, using the seaweed, and we have 4 simple ingredients. We have our semolina flour, we have the Gamtae itself, we have water, and we have salt. Very simple.
Chris mixes the seaweed into the pasta dough.
I felt like it seasoned the dough to a point where you actually tasted it through the pasta itself. It's got a lot of umami, a lot of pop.
The pasta is then cooked in a buttery wine sauce and topped with clams.
It's right on. Got tons of umami, bright, great mouthfeel, great texture.
While Chris could opt for cheaper types of seaweed, he says Gamtae's one-of-a-kind flavour is worth the price tag.
Anything's worth it in the pursuit of deliciousness.
And Chris isn't the only one willing to pay. Bada Soup provides Gamtae for high-end restaurants in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, as well as Belgium, France, and Germany. But this new demand has caused raw Gamtae prices to rise. Joo Hyun says since 2020, more producers have popped up.
지금은 감태하시는 분들도 조금씩 늘어나고 또 옛날만큼 많이 나지도 않은 경우들이 있어서 원물가가 굉장히 왔다 갔다 하는데 이거는 아마 다른 해조류들도 마찬가지일 거예요. 그래서 제가 처음에 감태 시작했을 때는 감태가 예를 들어서 원물 자체가 1kg에 이건 예로 1kg에 10만 원이다. 즉 하면은 지금은 거의 1kg에 한 30만 원 정도 되거든요.
But there is a silver lining. Joo Hyun says this new market for Gamtae is helping local communities in Seosan.
감태가 이제 많은 분들이 찾아주시고 또 저희도 수매를 많이 해주심으로 인해서 그 어가에서 겨울에 소득을 올릴 수 있는 큰 소득원이 됐습니다. 그동안 10년 넘는 시간 그리고 아버지의 40년 넘는 시간이 그냥 헛되게 보낸 게 아니다라는 생각이 들더라고요.
내가 못한 거 제가 이제 열심히 하고 잘하고 있으니까 좀 마음이 뿌듯해요. 바람에는 이제 우리 송 대표가 노력한 만큼 이제 국내도 그렇지만 이제 해외도 세계적으로 이제 뻗쳐서 이 브랜드를 제대로 만들어서 그러고 나갔으면 하는 것이 바람이고.
Toddy tappers structure their entire lives around this job. Milagres has to wake up at the break of dawn. First, he exercises for 15 minutes. He puts on an ointment to help ease the pain from climbing. Then he gets his tools ready. Toddy tapping is a cottage industry in Goa, and Milagres even has a few trees in his own backyard. But he does most of his work at a larger grove about half a mile away. It's owned by a local, and Milagres pays an annual fee of $24 per tree to collect toddy here. He uses nothing but his body strength to hoist himself up the trunk. He learned how to do this from a neighbor when he was 14. Over the years, he's overcome the fear of falling.
बिल जाल्यार गेलो मनीस मत जाल्यार खंय मता एक्सिडेंट जावन मरो शकता खंय प्लेन वचूं शकता खंय वचूं शकता तें काम आमगे पयलींच्यान तें आमच्या हातीक आसा तें काम हांव भिना.
He reaches the top in just a minute or two. Now he has to carefully balance himself and start tapping on the stem. After 2 days of tapping, he makes an incision in the top of the flowering stalk or spadix with a cleaver and fastens it with his plastic strip so that it doesn't burst open. He has to come back 3 times a day for the next 4 days to continue tapping and slicing the spadix by half a centimeter every time to induce the flow of toddy. Then he places a clay pot to collect the sap. Milagres climbs about 10 trees a day, and he has stalks at different stages of the process throughout the grove. At 55 years old, he still works 7 days a week. He transfers the sap into his container. At this stage, the toddy is non-alcoholic and sweet. With focus and patience, Milagres can collect sap from one spadix for over a month. A single coconut tree produces around 400 liters of it each year. Milagres has to bottle it immediately because as soon as it's exposed, the toddy begins to ferment. The warm tropical climate speeds up the process. At home, he strains the sap to get rid of any coconut fibers. He makes up to $300 a month selling mostly the raw toddy and sometimes the distilled coconut fenny. But not as many locals are drinking it these days, favoring other cheap alcoholic drinks like beer. In Goa, coconut fenny has been known as a drink of the poor, consumed mainly by the working class who could afford it. India originally classified it as a country liquor. That meant it could be exported abroad, but not to other Indian states. In 2016, it was reclassified as a heritage spirit. But it's still hard for distillers to sell it nationwide. Licenses are expensive, and some states haven't caught up to the changes. Meanwhile, India has become one of the fastest growing alcohol markets in the world. The boom is driven mostly by spirits like whiskey and tequila. But artisanal drinks are gaining popularity too, and distiller Hansel Vaz is hoping to cash in on that trend. He's marketing coconut fenny as a premium brand, a drink that's made with high-quality ingredients and handcrafted with care.
From what I'm seeing right now, we're getting a lot of international chatter about this spirit. We're not copying a gin, we're not copying a whiskey. This is an original spirit from the soul of India.
He hopes the organic nature of this drink will appeal to connoisseurs. It's even distilled in a unique way. Workers pour the sap into a traditional clay pot and seal it with mud. Next, the pot is heated on high flames till it releases vapors. These pass through a pipe to a tank where they condense and drip out. One distillation cycle takes 5 hours. He says he's already seen the Feni's reputation shift in his lifetime.
11 years ago, nobody looked at Feni. You would be embarrassed to drink a coconut Feni. Today, we have the 5-star hotels. We've got the top bartenders in the country asking for Feni.
Commercial Feni can contain up to 40% alcohol. But Milagros' version has a little bit less. And there are drinks in other parts of the world that have gone through a similar journey, like mezcal in Mexico. For centuries, it was known as the drink of the poor, more accessible to the masses than tequila. But it has soared in popularity in recent years as Americans fell in love with its smoky flavor, which comes from cooking agave hearts in an earthen oven that is built from scratch. After 5 days, the cooked fruit is removed and crushed by placing it in this molino or grinder. A horse pulls the stone, which weighs a whopping 1,000 pounds. Next, the agave fibers are moved into these vats and left to ferment with water. Naturally occurring yeast gets to work eating the sugar and converting it into alcohol. After about a week, the mixture is transferred into heated tanks for distillation. As the agave fibers heat up, the alcohol vapor rises. It travels through this tube, condenses, and drops into an awaiting jug. Mezcal production in Mexico jumped 400% from 2014 to 2020. Now, the US market for mezcal is bigger than Mexico's. Tappers in Goa are also doing their best to promote coconut Feni. They're pushing for a geographical indication tag that would make Goa the only place to authentically produce it. Another type of Feni made from cashews already has this classification.
It is a great spirit with a great story and a great culture, but we've not been able to put it out.
Like toddy tapping, this is also a traditional business.
We've been in a bubble for more than 200 years. The Feni has existed, but never spoken about. And now it's time that we come out of a bubble.
Local families collect fallen fruits every morning. After removing the cashew nut, they smash the fruit using their feet to extract the nectar. The last bits are piled into a mound, and every last drop of juice is squeezed out. Then it's fermented and distilled using centuries-old techniques.
Our ancestors had this thought where they said, you know what, let's innovate. Let's take an extra step ahead. You know, if we can do distilled toddy, which has sugar, let's try distilling fruits.
The drink became a part of local Goan cuisine when the Portuguese colonized the state in 1510. It was Catholic missionaries who introduced distillation techniques that are still used today. Milagros' mother, Cristalina, used to make cashew Feni too. But at 74 years old, she's now retired and prefers a quiet life at home. Still, her only son works night and day, even through family emergencies, so that the sap doesn't go to waste.
माँ मरा, बाप मरो, वो बेबी मरो, कौन मर गया? छुट्टी नहीं में क्या? एक दिन नहीं जाता है, वो सुर नहीं आता है, इसलिए रोज को जाने को मांगता.
But now his children don't want to follow in his footsteps. They're hoping to make more money than toddy tappers.
पहिले सो काम करता आमगे गावां 30 जाण काम करताले पहिले ते मी आत तेंको ते जायना म्हूण तें काम सोडे आमी एक कोताय ते लास्ट.
But as long as he's fit, Milagros will continue to climb these palm trees and carry on Goa's legacy.
Although making su filindeu is complex, the ingredients are simple: semolina flour, water, and salt. Luca mixes them together to form a dough.
Io fin da piccolo ero il classico bambino che quando vedevo mamma impastare, qualsiasi cosa lei facesse, ero sempre in mezzo. E poi per farmi stare buono mi davano un pezzo di pasta impastata e mi facevano giocare. Piano piano ho iniziato a lavorare, a fare un po' tutto.
Getting the dough completely smooth can take up to 20 minutes.
È una pasta che ha tante varianti, il clima, l'umidità, il caldo, e lì devi essere bravo a capire quando dare più acqua, quando darne di meno.
He alternates between adding drops of salt brine and fresh water as he needs.
Sembrano solo frasi fatte, ma è vero, la pasta la senti cambiare, la pasta quasi parla con te e ti dice ok, sono pronta. Al tatto deve sentirsi liscio e vellutato.
Stretching is the key to Su Filindeu's thin strands. In one swift motion, Luca folds the dough in half to make 2 pieces, then 4, then 8. He continues until he forms 256 perfectly even threads of pasta. Each one is as thin as a strand of hair.
Non esiste macchinario per fare i filindeu, è una pratica che può essere fatta solo ed esclusivamente con le mani.
Luca has to be careful not to break any of the strands as he places them on a traditional wicker base called a fundu. It's made of asphodel, a plant that grows throughout the region.
L'asfodelo ha la grande capacità di aiutare nell'essiccazione la pasta e poi di dare anche un sapore in più a quello che sarà poi il risultato finale una volta cucinato.
Layering is the key to Su Filindeu's mesh-like design. It's also the trickiest step of the process for Luca. The strands cannot be moved once they are on the fundu, so he has to be precise. He removes any excess dough from the edges before working on the next section.
È importante essere i più veloci possibili, in quanto lo strato inferiore si va a attaccare a quello superiore. Se lo strato inferiore è asciutto, quello superiore non si attacca e quindi in fase di cottura si disfa.
Luca only has 20 minutes to finish all 3 layers.
Questo è il lavoro ultimato.
For the people of Nuoro, Su Filindeu is sacred. Traditionally, the dish was prepared only twice a year during celebrations to honor St. Francis. Pilgrims from Nuoro would travel 20 miles to his shrine. Women from a local family would gather and prepare bowls of Su Filindeu for those who completed the trek.
Tradizionale è cucinarlo con un brodo di pecora e condirlo con del formaggio pecorino fresco fatto inacidire.
This hasn't changed since at least the 19th century.
Su Filindeu è vero, era un lavoro prettamente femminile, o meglio, una lavorazione prettamente femminile.
But generations of secrecy have left only a handful of people in Nuoro with the knowledge and interest to make the dish. In 2021, a Su Filindeu maker from the family divulged the recipe to other women in the community in an effort to keep the dish from disappearing. Other Nuoro residents like Luca stepped in to keep the tradition alive. But for him, finding a teacher was impossible.
Non avendo ricevuto risposte positive dalle persone a cui avevo chiesto di insegnarmelo.
Luca decided to take matters into his own hands.
Perché devono farlo solo le donne?
Slowly, Luca started getting inquiries from chefs in Canada, England, China, Germany, and beyond.
Questa dimostrazione che è una pasta richiestissima e conosciutissima anche oltre confini nazionali, non solo della nostra isola.
Over 6,000 miles away outside of Los Angeles, one of Luca's students is bringing a new life to Su Filindeu. Chef Rob Gentile has spent over 20 years bringing the flavors of his Italian background to the fine dining restaurants in Canada and the US.
It was always this, like, holy grail of pasta. I always wanted to
learn how to make it. It's just one of those things. It's like, before I die, I want to know how to make Filindeu.
For years, Rob struggled to find a teacher. But when the masters in Nuado finally began sharing their knowledge, he jumped at the opportunity.
It started to become like, how do we keep this tradition alive? How do we encourage the people who are excited about it to foster this amazing product? And this is where I met Luca.
Rob spent hours watching and learning how to knead and stretch the dough in Luca's home.
I was like, I can do this. It's not that difficult, because Luca made it look so easy. It was a very memorable moment my entire life. It was like, couldn't even believe this.
Now Rob is featuring Filindeu on the menu at his restaurant, Stella West Hollywood.
I just felt like it was something special that people needed to try. And every time I've introduced someone to it, it's a magical thing to eat.
As Filindeu expands to restaurants outside of Sardinia, awareness of the dish's cultural and religious significance could fade over time. But Luca and Rob believe that shouldn't stop people from sharing how to make it.
Purtroppo non tutti sono d'accordo a insegnarlo fuori, però io ho sempre detto che portare fuori questa pasta non toglie nulla alla paternità della pasta stessa.
I think that it can be appreciated as a technique in a pasta, and we could do things like zuppa di pesce with it and have fun with it, but it can also be celebrated as the religious tradition that it is. It's an exciting time for Filindeu because it's never really been anywhere else outside of Sardinia, and now it is.
And though the pasta is finding new homes, the tradition is still under threat in its birthplace. That's because to make the pasta the authentic way, you need a fundu. And there are not that many people left making them.
In questo momento stiamo andando a Olsai a far visita a una delle ultime maestre dell'intreccio dell'asfodelo. Permesso? Si può? Ciao.
Giovanna Porci has been weaving since she was a small child.
Io ho iniziato a fare l'asfodelo perché quando si alzava mamma che andava a fare qualche cosa, io di nascosto andavo e facevo qualche pezzettino, no? Però lei se ne accorgeva subito che lo doveva disfare, che io non lo facevo bene.
She starts by cutting the asphodel into thin strips. This tool is made from cow bone. Giovanna uses it to weave the plant into a round base. In Sardinia, women have passed down asphodel weaving for generations. It was a source of income for people like Giovanna's mother.
Paesi d'intorno, nei dintorni, andava a vendere i cestini, questi che ci sono attaccati al muro. Quindi faceva questo lavoro per guadagnare i soldi, per dare da mangiare ai suoi figli.
But today the trade has virtually disappeared, with only a few weavers remaining.
Infatti ancora oggi non mi spiego com'è possibile che una tradizione che ha fruttato così tanto alle persone stia andando piano piano a morire, a spegnersi.
Giovanna says young people haven't shown any interest in learning the craft. She's tried to teach women in her community, but she says it hasn't caught on.
E va nei mercati a vendere, già li vende, solo che non c'è chi li fa. Non è rimasto più nessuno. Non lo so, io sono orgogliosa di farlo, perché mi piace. Però sono stanca anch'io, capito?
Like weaving, the art of making Filindeu in Nuado is anything but widespread.
Nel senso che essendo poche le persone che lo producono, hai difficoltà a produrlo in quantità.
This limited production has also made the pasta expensive. 1 kilo can cost 26 to 30 euros, around 15 times the average price of pasta in Italy. But Luca doesn't believe selling it is the key to keeping this tradition alive.
Una pasta sacra è legata quindi a San Francesco, a un santo che ha fatto un voto di povertà, e non mi sembra moralmente corretto e giusto fare dei soldi su questa pasta.
Instead, his focus is teaching it to others, and he's putting his faith in people like Rob to bring the dish worldwide.
They're part of culture, they're part of a cuisine. It's just something that should be taught, it should be carried on, it should move forward.
Che essendo comunque la Sardegna una terra ricca di tradizione, sarebbe fantastico che domani ci si svegliasse e magari qualcuno è venuto all'idea di introdurre queste tradizioni e poterle insegnare nelle scuole.
While Luca doesn't know what the future holds, he's proud of the work he's doing to keep threads of God alive.
São Jorge is a tiny island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It is also home to one of the richest and most elaborate cheeses on Earth, São Jorge cheese. The volcanic geology of this island means that its soil is rich and fertile. The result is abundant vegetation that basically never dies, and cows that are able to graze freely 365 days a year. These conditions make São Jorge cheese incredibly rich in flavor. Every bite reminds of the very grass where everything started.
Há 2 vacas para cada açoriano. Elas só comem mesmo erva da pastagem, sem mais nada. Não são estabuladas nem nada, estão sempre ao ar livre. Por isso é que chamam as vacas açorianas as vacas felizes.
João is one of the keepers here in São Jorge. He runs one of the only 4 dairies on the island, the smallest of them all, and the one that sticks to the way this cheese has been made for decades. His 40 cows give him around 400 liters of milk per day, 200 at dawn and 200 at sunset. He will combine them to make cheese. When milk arrives at the dairy, it's João's mom, Graça, and his dad, Manuel, who take the lead. They devote the whole cheese-making process to preserving the flavors of the island in the cheese by not killing the native cultures that are present in the milk. To do that, there are 2 crucial steps. The first thing is to keep the milk raw and not pasteurize it. The second is to use whey from the day before to ferment the milk, instead of adding other fermenting agents. This way, the whey is imparting even more flavor to the milk without interfering with its natural composition. As this is a more gentle way to acidify the milk, it takes 4 hours to split the milk into curds, 1 hour of rest and 3 hours of cutting. This is more than double the time other cheeses take. Why is it this long? Is it like a recipe that is specific to São Jorge?
Sim, a receita é mesmo assim, são 4 horas. Pode até demorar mais das 4 horas, menos é mau sinal, é sinal que alguma coisa correu mal. Something went wrong.
How did the recipe come to you?
Aprendemos esta receita com várias pessoas que faziam queijo há cerca de 50 anos atrás. Alguns que faziam queijo em casa e outros que faziam queijo mesmo nas fábricas. Foi com as ideias de várias pessoas é que conseguimos chegar a esta receita.
And then your family has perfected it?
Yes.
Okay.
With the experience.
At the 4-hour mark, the cheese is salted and transferred into molds. It will stay in the molds for 48 hours, with just a short break after 1 day to quickly turn it. São Jorge then matures from 3 to 12 months. Unlike other cheeses that spend their aging days in temperature-controlled rooms, São Jorge rests at room temperature. Why? São Jorge Island is a very humid place, subject to constant fog, like really thick fog. As it ages, the humidity packs the cheese with moisture and turns it from sweet and mild to tangy and peppery.
O tempo também influencia muito o queijo, principalmente no inverno. O queijo é melhor do que no verão. O calor é um bocado inimigo do queijo.
Okay.
Daí que também a maioria das fábricas são na parte alta da ilha, porque é a parte mais fresca.
That's true. Actually, we drove around and we saw all the cheese making at the top.
Fica mais macio, fica melhor. É sempre melhor. Com umidade do queijo é sempre melhor do que no verão. Este queijo tem mais ou menos 2 meses. 2 meses e tal, 2 e meio talvez.
And it's ready to be to be tasted.
Está pronto a vender,
Okay.
sim.
And what is this? Is this like the moisture of the cheese
Yes.
that is inside? Okay. Just from here you can see that it's pretty wet inside.
E ainda há outro pormenor interessante aqui, que é estes pontinhos vermelhos, castanhos, que a oxidação da gordura, a secagem da gordura, faz uma coisa que parece ferrugem, que nós chamamos mesmo a ferrugem do queijo. E é uma das características que é devido a curar à temperatura ambiente.
Can we try?
Yes. It's a bit spicy, like São Jorge cheese. Este queijo cura mais rapidamente que o grande, que as outras cooperativas têm à volta de 10 kg. E este, como tem 3,5 kg, seca mais rápido.
And it's nice and soft, but without being chewy. You can feel the humidity, it's still
Thank you.
there. On an island where there are so few people and the only ones to compete for space are cows and hydrangeas, you might expect that Joao's cheese is accessible to all the human population here. But this is not the case. There are bigger, more commercial cheese factories on the island that are making a less traditional version of São Jorge cheese.
Isto foi sonho antigo de família, de meu pai, que ele foi criado, via o seu pai a trabalhar a dirigir a cooperativa, que ele era dirigente, era diretor. E depois sempre tivemos vacas, toda a vida tivemos vacas, eu fui criado também nisto e gosto muito disto porque foi aquilo que é a tradição da ilha e é muito bom continuar as tradições.